Hey there, it's Dr. Justin Marcagiani. Welcome to Beyond Wellness Radio, where we provide actionable health information on a week-to-week basis that can help you improve your life. Feel free, head over to justinhealth.com, where we have various opt-in video series on more in-depth health topics such as female hormones, thyroid, and gut health. Also, while you're there, feel free and schedule a consult with myself, Dr. J, and or my colleagues. We're available worldwide to provide natural health support for any of your major health issues. Again, welcome to the podcast and enjoy the show. And we are live. It's Dr. Justin Marcagiani in the house with Evan Brand. Today, we're going to be talking about hormone and adrenal lab testing, what we're actually using in our virtual clinic to assess our hormone imbalances in our patients and different things that we're doing to address those imbalances. Evan, how are we doing, man?
I'm good. Excited to get back in the saddle here and talk about something that we can test at home, which is amazing. I think that's the first benefit to point out about some of the testing you and I are utilizing is that many people now, they care more about their health than ever. Obviously, the state of the world has convinced people that health does matter and you need to prioritize this stuff. And so we can send these labs to your door. And so the test that you're going to be showing people today will be something that you can do. If you're listening via audio, you might miss the visual. You can go to Justin Health YouTube channel and see the video, but we'll be sure to make sure we talk about it in a way that you can still understand, even if you're just audio only today.
Yeah, and if you're listening to the audio, we'll put a link down below for the video so you can see it. And also, if you're listening, you can go to justinhealth.com/YouTube and hit subscribe. All right, so let's dive in, Evan. So we deal with patients from all over the world virtually that have all kinds of different hormonal imbalances. It could range from a menopausal woman with lots of hot flashes, mood issues, vaginal dryness, depression, skin elasticity, hair loss issues. It could be a cycling woman that has a lot of PMS, PMDD, breast tenderness, cramping, back pain, mood issues, irritability, also infertility as well. And then there's a lot of different imbalances in between. Excess androgen issues like we see in PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. We may even see estrogen dominant issues, just like which could be PMS as well. Could be infertility, could be fibroids, could be endometriosis, could be fibrocystic breast issues. All of these things are on the table. And of course, even male issues too. Men could have excess estrogen, and or low androgen and or low or high cortisol and or low or high DHEA. All of these imbalances are potential. I always tell my patients, you have the right to have more than one issue at the same time. And you can also have a hormone imbalance and also have multiple gut infections too. Of course, it's all possible, right?
Yeah, people hearing that too, they're like, what the heck kind of mumbo jumbo did he just say? And how does that manifest? Well, low libido too. I mean, that's one that I'd say at least 90% of the people I'm working with, that's a question we always ask is, how's your sex drive? And sex drive is always terrible for people. I was actually a study that came out and the vast majority of people surveyed said that they would rather scroll on their smartphone on social media than have sex with their partner. And I thought, oh God, is that where we are in the technology world, that the phone is more desirable than our partners? That's no good.
Yeah, definitely not good. 100%. So I just kind of laid out a couple of potential patterns there. We'll kind of dive into them one by one. We'll actually show you a real live patient lab here for y'all to kind of look at. Obviously, it'll be censored regarding who the patient is, but we'll put all that information out there for y'all so you can kind of see how a lab looks out of the gate. So one of the first things that we do when we look at a patient, male or female, we're going to look at adrenal function. And adrenal function is very important because your adrenals make cortisol. Cortisol is an anti-inflammatory hormone. Most people in today's day and age, they're not underinflamed, they're overinflamed. So having your body's natural anti-inflammatory system on board is vital, very, very important. Second is cortisol rhythm. Cortisol rhythm plays a major role in your circadian rhythm, which is waking up, energy in the morning. Having good rhythm helps a lot with mood, and also lower cortisol at night and that nice gentle taper of cortisol. So cortisol starts mid-range when you wake up, and then that first 30 minutes to an hour, it almost doubles. And then from there, it tapers down throughout the whole day. And we want a nice lower cortisol rhythm, lower cortisol level at nighttime so we can wind down and relax. Not too low where we start having maybe blood sugar issues, which could wake us up at night, and not too high where we could have problems going to bed because we're too wired, right? Or not a reverse pattern where we're lower it in the morning, which means low energy, and higher at night, relatively speaking, which could cause us to have too much energy at night, and then we don't get good sleep. So the adrenals play a really big role because of cortisol and its effects on anti-inflammatory, mood, rhythm, sleep. And then also, especially for women listening, men too, but DHEA sulfate is a precursor to a lot of our sex hormones that helps with our female hormones. And that plays a big role in healthy reproduction. People think when they talk about female hormones, they're just thinking about having babies. No, your hormones are there to reproduce you. Yeah, reproduce a baby, but also reproduce you, which means healthy aging, healing, recovery. As a man too, healing, recovery, healthy libido, good muscle building, and good building the ability to turn over your tendons and ligaments and bones. All these things require good, healthy anabolic metabolism.
Yeah, great point. One thing you pointed out, which I think a lot of people miss with cortisol, is you mentioned cortisol being too low at night and that impairing your sleep. See, most people, just the buzzword, or if they've ever heard of cortisol, if they've heard of adrenal testing and things like that, they think, okay, high cortisol at night equals poor sleep. But you mentioned low cortisol at night, or too low cortisol at night could also be an issue because of that blood sugar. And then what can happen is, you and I've covered this before, but there's some sort of a spike, right? Maybe an adrenaline cortisol spike in the middle of the night. Is that what you think is happening?
Yeah. So with sleep issues, you could definitely see a low cortisol kind of going into nighttime, or a low cortisol during the night. And that can cause a drop in blood sugar. And that drop in blood sugar can then signal a increase in adrenaline. So adrenaline tends to come to the scene first. Cortisol tends to come to the scene 10, 20 minutes later or so. So you get this spike of adrenaline that's very stimulatory, that increases cortisol, and then now you're alert and you're waking up, right? So we want to make sure lower cortisol at night that's causing a increase in cortisol is not happening due to blood sugar regulations. We want good blood sugar, good healthy protein and fats, maybe work on amino acids and melatonin production at or around bedtime, and maybe have something by your nightstand to help stabilize blood sugar before or if you get up, like a nice simple collagen smoothie, or a really good protein and fat based simple bar by your nightstand to stabilize blood sugar. Those are all really, really good options to help you on the sleep side.
So, like if you eat a good quality protein, fat, maybe some carb starch with dinner, but let's say, I don't know, 9, 10 p.m., you go to have a snack and you just do, I don't know, popcorn, or I don't know, handful of strawberries, some kind of a simple sugar. You think it's possible that your glucose could spike and then it will crash in the middle of the night if you're doing something too simple or too high on the glycemic index?
Well, it depends on how blood sugar sensitive you are. I mean, the two examples you gave are two different things, right? Because grains and popcorn are going to be a little bit more higher glycemic, higher sugar stuff. Strawberries, pretty low glycemic and a lot of fiber there. So probably not as much with the strawberries, but could you have some strawberries and maybe a spoonful of almond butter, right? Or some kind of a good fat or protein? Probably better, right? It just depends upon what time you're going to bed and what time you're eating. Usually you see it, people that are eating around 5 or 6 o'clock dinner, and they're going to bed like around 11, and there's like a 5-hour gap between their last meal and sleep, potentially. And again, it has to do with how dysregulated their blood sugar is and how weak their adrenals are. So it really depends. But if sleep's an issue, that's one pattern we want to look at. We talked about DHEA playing a big role. If you're a female going into menopause, that means your egg follicles are being used up essentially, and you're not going to get that hormone production from that follicle that's now no longer there. So we require a lot of the DHEA from our adrenals to now be made. And if our adrenal reserves on DHEA are low, guess what? We're not going to have that backup battery that we had all ready to go, right? We're just coming out of a bunch of storms in Austin here. And if you didn't have a generator ready to go, guess what? You went without power for a while. Well, that's kind of like going into menopause is going into a storm with a generator that's maybe 3/4 empty. And so the adrenals play a really important role as the backup generator for sex hormones. And so the better that generator is charged up, the easier you're going to sail into menopause and not have all the hot flashes and mood issues and sleep issues and skin issues and hormone issues and vaginal dryness issues that you may have with lower sex hormone reserves.
Yep, well said. You ready to show us this thing? I'm sure people that are on video want to see what the heck we're talking about. We can see some of the rhythms, and also DHEA is measured too, which is cool. So when we talk about a cortisol test, we're getting a lot more than cortisol too, right? We're getting melatonin also.
Exactly. And then one last thing to look at is PCOS, which is also common. You see it more in younger women, 20 and 30s, but blood sugar issues, high level of insulin, this can really jack up testosterone. And this can do a whole bunch of issues in regards to abnormal hair growth. You may see an increase in libido, some still go down. And then of course, weight gain is going to be another big side effect there. Let me share my screen with you so you guys can see an actual lab test for y'all. Okay. All right. So while I get that going here in the meantime, anything else you wanted to say about that, Evan?
Well, you and I were talking about this before we hit record, and it was the idea of retesting hormones. And you thought, well, based on a lot of people with progress, you don't
Mhm.
necessarily need to incur the cost again. So a lot of times you and I may run this as an initial snapshot, but depending on symptoms, you may not need to do this over and over and over again, because a lot of the supports we're using are pretty broad spectrum and they're going to help regulate your rhythm regardless of where it's at, right? So initially, we may want to tweak one thing a certain direction or the other, but long-term care wise, you and I are using things that are pretty, would you just say stabilizing, not necessarily a big sledgehammer to the hormones?
It depends for me. So if someone has very, very low cortisol levels or very, very high cortisol levels and or significant estrogen dominance and low progesterone, the more significant the hormonal pattern, the more significant the imbalance, the more I want to retest. Less significant, if we see corresponding symptomatic improvement, usually it becomes less necessary because the patient knows they're getting better. We can feel it. We can see it in their physiological activation and how they're sleeping, their mood, their energy, their libido. We can, their cycle. There's just so many things that are improving that the patient's confident that we're good. And if the imbalance isn't major, right? If they're not a fertility case, they don't have a major hormonal imbalance, right? Then it may not be as necessary. But I always if I'm on the fence, I'll always give the patient the ability to make a decision on that. So this is my screen here. Evan, are you able to see it?
Yep, we see it just
All
fine.
right. So here's a Dutch test that's done with a patient who's kind of perimenopausal, menopausal, meaning their cycles kind of been on and off, hasn't really had it for 6 to 8 months or so, kind of in that area of transitioning into full menopause, which is usually not having a cycle for a full year, 12 months in a row. So they're kind of in this perimenopausal phase. And usually perimenopause can start to hit in your early to mid 40s, where you start skipping months. Maybe you start having some hot flash like symptoms, whether it's mood or libido or hot flash stuff. And again, it's always tough to say because perimenopause can easily feel like PMS too, right? I think that the biggest differentiating factor is not having all the hot flashes and not having the skip cycles when it comes to more of the PMS like stuff. That's usually a distinguishing factor. But when we look at the Dutch test, a couple things here. This is our cortisol pattern, our daily free cortisol pattern. And you can see you wake up here at A and your cortisol should taper up in the morning. This is within the first hour and then go down throughout the day. So this patient actually started with A here, right? This is cortisol with a pretty good rhythm out of the gates. But instead of peaking up 100% or so, they actually went down. So they started here. Instead of having that nice rise, they went down. This is big. This is a big problem, right? Not going to have the energy, not going to have that good rhythm, that good up and at 'em kind of energy in the morning. And they trace low the entire day, relatively low and flat the entire day. So we call this a flat cortisol rhythm. Relatively speaking, it's flat. They should be starting here at A, peaking up at B, and then gently tapering down throughout the day. And they basically start at A at their highest point and they go down throughout the day. So very low and flat cortisol rhythm. Now, when we look at their cortisol levels, their free cortisol, which is A plus B plus C plus D, this is what's represented on the graph here. And again, if you're listening on the podcast, click down below to watch the video link if you want. If not, we'll just try to describe it. Their free cortisol, when you add A plus B plus C plus D, is 73. That's very low. So if you see this little gauge here, imagine this is like the volume knob on your stereo. This is all the way up high, this star, and this on the left's all the way up low. So they're almost all the way to the left. It's like their volume knob is like 5% on. It's like having a whisper out of their stereo. So 73 is very, very low. Now, this is the cool part, right? So normally with a salivary test, right, the Dutch test is the dried urine for testing comprehensive hormones. The benefit of this test is we get a window into free cortisol, but also total cortisol because it's urine. With a salivary test, we'd only be able to see this 73 number, which is the free cortisol. That's 2 to 5% of all cortisol is free and biologically available. The other total, which looks at the free, which is the 2 to 5%, plus everything else that's protein bound. Let's give us a window into all of our cortisol we're making. Now, this is the cool thing. We never would have this number on a free cortisol test from saliva, but you can see their total cortisol, which is everything, is very high. It's 9304, right? It's way off the charts high. So they have very, very, very low free cortisol, very, very, very high total cortisol. So there's not like an adrenal fatigue issue or like a low adrenal pattern. Even though the cortisol is low, their adrenals are making a lot of it, right? And this is a common pattern we see when there's HPA axis dysfunction. So if you go down to this page over here, you're going to see what the HPA axis is. I'll go back and I'll just explain this in a minute. But if we go down to this page here, the HPA axis, we have this feedback loop from the hypothalamus and the pituitary. This is the HP portion of the HPA axis. And this communication feedback loop talks to the adrenals, where we make cortisol, where we make DHEA. And we have our free cortisol, we have our total cortisol, we have our DHEA. This feedback loop from our corticotropic releasing hormone to the adrenal corticotropic releasing hormone, this feedback loop is our HPA axis. And when this starts to break down and that feedback loop, that miscommunication happens, this is where we start seeing a very high amount of total cortisol and a very, very low amount of free cortisol. Does that make sense out of the gates? Questions there, Evan?
Makes perfect sense. So what do you do?
Yeah. So let me continue to roll with that. Let me go back up here a little bit more.
DHEA production looked good there, though. That was nice to see.
So let's kind of break it down. So I always hit things like this. I have my order of doing things. That way I don't miss anything. So the first thing I look at is cortisol rhythm. How's the cortisol rhythm? Good in the morning, A, and then B, C, and D, morning, afternoon, night are low, low, low. So normal, low, low, low. So definitely poor cortisol rhythm. How's the cortisol amount? Well, free cortisol is low. Okay. Total cortisol is high. Now, so I tend to treat someone more in the middle in regards to their adrenal support. I won't over support their cortisol too much because we know they're making a lot. So we're really going to focus on an in-between amount of cortisol and more HPA access support in regards to adaptogenic herbs. We really have to support good adaptogens. This being a menopausal woman or perimenopausal, we're going to support the adrenals. We're going to support HPA axis, and we're also going to use herbs to support the estrogen and progesterone receptor sites. We're going to do both, okay? So you can see her. Now, the next part is sex hormones. So we talked about the total cortisol, right? Free cortisol low, total cortisol high, strong HPA axis pattern. And then the sex hormone-wise, estradiol is low. This is primarily the hormone that's going to be used in cycling women. Progesterone's low. They're both equally low. You see how they fall in the same place in the dial? So if you're looking at the volume knob, they're both in the same place. They're both low on the volume knob. Usually with estrogen dominance, we'll start to see the estrogen knob higher up relative to progesterone. So that tends to give us a good ratio if we're intact. So estrogen to progesterone ratio is good, but the hormones are just low altogether. And then testosterone for a perimenopausal woman, it's in the bottom 25% of the range. Not bad for a perimenopausal woman. You know, top 25, top third to half is ideal. Not bad at all.
And this woman was not doing anything, correct? She wasn't doing any DHEA or testosterone support?
Incorrect. And then I ignore total DHEA. I look at these numbers individually here. I look at DHEA, sulfate, etocalanolone, andro. I look at them all separately. Her total DHEA number looks okay, but that can give you a false interpretation. And again, I've been doing labs like this lab for 6 years. I've been looking at hormone labs for over a decade. So, I mean, I've done thousands of these things. So I always try to boil it down to the patterns and the data that matters, and I ignore the fluff.
So how would this woman feel? I think important to mention, you know, all these numbers, people may look at this and think, okay, this looks like Greek. So can you just explain how would a woman with that pattern be feeling? We're seeing that cortisol was okay in the morning.
A lot of perimenopausal symptoms, libido, mood, hot flash stuff, skipping cycles, of course, low energy, mood stuff. All of those things are present for sure. And then look at her DHEA sulfate here, right? This is the backup generator of the sex hormones. It's in the bottom 25% of the range. So this is the dial here, right? 170. She's definitely on the lower part here, that bottom 25%. I like to group things based off a percentage. The actual numbers don't matter as much. Like I just say, hey, you're in the bottom 25% of the reference range. I like my patients in the top half, the top 25% or so. So I always look at things as a percentage. That way you don't get overly infatuated on the numbers. The numbers can kind of confuse things. Testosterone's in the bottom 25%, not as bad there. But I mean, if we get the DHEA to the mid range, the testosterone should take care of itself because that's going to trickle downstream from DHEA to andro to testosterone. All of her androgens are okay. They're all mid to upper 25%. No problem there. Her hormones are pretty balanced in regards to 5-alpha reductase. This is kind of the, this enzyme is very important to things going down a less androgenic pathway to versus like DHT, which could be more associated with hair loss and prostate issues. And then if we go look at her estrogen levels over here, so this is progesterone. Progesterone is calculated by pregnanediol plus alpha pregnanediol. So alpha and beta combined. And we already saw her levels here. This is 1.9. I don't know why the lab doesn't show that number here. It should. It's like an error, but it's 1.9 should be the progesterone number. Now, go look at the estrogen, and that's low. I mean, from a cycling female, we want at least 10, ideally 15 on the progesterone. And then if we go look on the estrogens, right, she's low across the board. So estrone is E1. You know how you know it's E1? It has ONE in it, right? And that's how we know it's E1. And then estradiol, this is your primary cycling estrogen. And it's E2 because it's got the prefix DI in there. Di meaning two, right? Like two sets of dice, die. And then we have estriol, which is E3, and the TRI prefix is how we know it's E3. So for short, E1, E2, E3, or estrone, estradiol, estriol. And again, estradiol will predominate when you're cycling more, and estriol should shift when you're more menopausal, okay? And we tend to support more estriol when women are menopausal. So her estrogens are pretty low across the board. You can see that, you know, these are all the metabolites downstream that you can see. And again, if we want healthy estrogen metabolism, right, we have E2, E4, and E16, which are different estrogen metabolites. And then you can see here, it goes down this protective pathway from E1 to 2-hydroxyestrone. And then that goes down into and gets methylated into 2-methoxyestrogen. And you can see here, right, to keep it really simple, this 2.5 number on the estrogen metabolite should go down this pathway. At least half of that should be metabolized. It's not. And so you can look at this methylation gauge. Don't look at the numbers, just look at the gauge. So her methylation activity for metabolizing estrogen is actually low. So this is not getting fully metabolized. Now, why is that a problem? Well, one, she's not metabolizing estrogen. Two, her estrogen levels are low to begin with. So it just tells me that there's some methylation detoxification issues that are a problem. Why could that be a bigger problem? Well, if we start supporting more DHEA and maybe start supporting hormones better, this could cause a backup in regards to her hormones being metabolized. We may want to really work on supporting extra sulfur groups, extra methylating nutrients, so there's not a clog in these hormones getting metabolized. So in general, we want to see at least half of this getting metabolized downstream. So if we look at 2-hydroxy-E1, we want at least 1.25 there. And again, forget the numbers. It's all represented in the gauge. So I want this gauge at least mid-range. If the gauge is not mid-range and it's on the lower side, it tells me we're not metabolizing or methylating our hormones actively, you know, as optimally as possible. We may want to provide supporting nutrients to help that.
So let me ask you this. If a woman, maybe she had run this and got the analysis from you, but then she just went to her conventional hormone doctor down the street and he goes and puts her on some estrogen and maybe some progesterone, maybe some testosterone. How would that differ in terms of outcome based on this versus what you're going to do?
Well, number one is they're going to look at your estradiol just via the blood. And that's okay, but it may not be able to look at free estradiol as well. And most of the time, they're not going to time it up at the right time of the cycle. You really want to time some of these things up around day 20 of the cycle to get a window of where progesterone's at. And then, of course, you have to compare it to where in the cycle it is. And the next thing is no one's going to look at how it's being metabolized downstream. So we get a window into our total estrogen, all of our estrogens, E1, E2, E3, not just estradiol. We're getting a window of progesterone as well. We're getting a window into our androgens. We're getting a window into DHEA and our testosterone. And then we're also looking at how it metabolizes downstream from 16-hydroxy, from 4-hydroxy, and to 2-hydroxy, 2, 4, and 16. And then
so
we can look at how it's metabolizing.
What's the protocol for this woman?
So it depends. So off the bat, we may want to support estrogen metabolism a little bit better. That could be giving something like NAC. It could be giving something like glutathione. It could be doing something like indole 3-carbinol, DIM, or calcium to glucarate could all be really good options. Even just giving some extra fiber could also be really helpful, just to help out of the gates, just to make sure there's no bottlenecks there. Number two, we would support the adrenals accordingly. Okay. We would support sex hormones as well. So depending on if she's cycling or not, because remember this woman kind of was skipping cycles, we would definitely do herbs, like different kinds of phenotypes of maca that we use. I use a product called Feminescence Menopause. That's a special phenotype of maca. You can get that at justinhealth.com/shop in the female hormone section. That's wonderful because it works on upstream HPA axis. We may work on in different herbs to help the HPA axis too, like ashwagandha, which is wonderful at modulating that high level of cortisol. And then depending on hormones, we may want to throw in some progesterone, especially if she's cycling in the last half of the month. And we may want to throw in a little bit of estriol, depending on if she's cycling or not. If she's transitioning into menopause at her age, right? 52, I think, is the age of this patient. Well, the average age of menopause is 48 to 52. So she's definitely on the later side. So she may be transitioning into menopause. And if she has no cycles for a period of time, we may want to throw a little bit of estriol in. But if she's not, if she's still cycling, we don't want to do any estriol right now. We want to focus on good, healthy herbal support for estrogen production. We want to focus on good DHEA support. We want to focus on progesterone the last half of the month. We want to also focus on good estrogen metabolism. We want to focus on really, really, really good HPA access support. All of those things are going to be really, really important. I'm not going to give like an exact protocol on dosing just because it's, this is a very general kind of thing right now. I don't have the patient in front of me, but it just kind of gives you a good idea what I'm looking at there.
Totally. So someone may think, oh, they saw that high metabolized cortisol and they may think they need to come in and do something like Relora, which a lot of people talk about to lower cortisol. That is not the right choice to do because her total or the free cortisol is already on the low end, correct? So like at nighttime, like if this woman says, hey, I'm not sleeping good at night, you're not going to come in and use Relora, are you? Because that would take the low situation and make it lower. Is that right?
I wouldn't give something that would lower the free cortisol more, like something like a phosphatidylcholine or serine, right? But I would do some things to calm down the HPA axis for sure. So things that really can help calm it down, because that total cortisol being really high is what's telling me that there's definitely HPA axis issues. But I mean, it's possible some of these symptoms could kind of conflict because her free cortisol is so low and her total cortisol is so high. But I wouldn't overly lower the free cortisol. I would just focus more on adaptogens to help modulate over cortisol, just the overactivity, the overstimulation of the adrenals as a whole. And I would still come in there and support with some pregnenolone and DHEA as well. I wouldn't overdo it either, though, because her cortisol is total on the higher side. So this is where it's really important. Like it'd be really easy to want to give this woman a lot of licorice and a lot of pregnenolone. Some of that may be necessary, but you may want to just take into consideration that she has a total cortisol level that's very high, and we may want to have some kind of in-between dose. So we got to really look at that total cortisol production in relationship to the free and not overdo it.
Yeah, and what you're saying is because she's desperate to feel better, right? And you want to give her more energy, and you're going to look at that rhythm and say, okay, yeah, it'd be great to give her a boost. Here's some licorice at breakfast time and maybe some lunchtime dose to perk her up. But you're saying you can overdo it because of how high the total is in this case.
Yep, very easy to do that.
Yeah.
Yep,
and so then that would manifest how? Maybe anxiety, heart palpitations, insomnia.
If we overdid it, yes, potentially heart palps, potentially insomnia, potentially anxiety. All of those things are potential issues that you may see a problem with.
Yeah. And this is why we love to mix herbs too, right? You're rarely going to be using an herb in isolation, right? You're going to be coming in possibly with ashwagandha, but you may come in possibly morning. Maybe she could benefit from something like some eleuthero, some holy basil, maybe some other more stimulating things if you don't want to go too high on the licorice. Is that what you would do?
Correct. Yep. 100%.
Cool.
Any other questions there so far?
It's great to see it. I think this should help a lot of people.
Yeah. In general, you really want to make sure you kind of clearly delineate where the patient is in their hormonal pattern. I think it's really tough. The hardest part is when you have a woman who's perimenopausal, who's still cycling, but is starting to not cycle and starting to switch into menopause, because you kind of have two ways to handle a woman if they're still cycling versus they're not, because hormones have a rhythmic fashion, and you want to add them in, pull them out. And if a woman's more menopausal, you can keep hormones really in throughout the month. You don't have to cycle them as much. And so I always err on the side of treating a woman like they're cycling until they clearly delineate that they aren't cycling. Because if I start giving hormones monthly, daily, and that could throw off their cycling pattern, I don't want to do that, right? First, do no harm. Let the body clearly delineate where it's at in regards to its natural hormonal pattern. So the hardest part in dealing with women is if they're perimenopausal, transitioning to menopause. I really want their bodies to clearly show me that they're ready to stop cycling. And that's, I always treat them like they're cycling until it's crystal clear they aren't.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the most common time for symptoms, right? So that's probably the majority of what people are going to feel or in that stage of their life. They're going to feel the most symptomatic in that transition time, or at least in what you and I've seen. This is probably the most common time a woman's going to reach out for help.
110%. Yep. So it's really, really important to kind of take a look at that and make sure that we keep that in mind. Absolutely. And then also, we have different estrogen metabolism risks, right? We have different estrogen metabolites. So if we look over here, we have E1, E2, and E3. And when you look at these different metabolites, E1 tends to be a little bit more, safer, right? E1 tends to be a little bit more safer in regards to its detoxification. Okay. And then when you look at E4, 2-hydroxyestrogen, right? Our estradiol here, this can go down pathways as well. Our 4, that could be a little bit more damaging to DNA. So our 4-hydroxy could be a little bit more damaging, as you can see.
Let me ask you this real quick. So if you scroll down a little, it's showing how on that pathway you can get DNA damage. It's showing reactive there. So we have to factor in what we learned from the stool test into this also, right? Because if we see like a high beta glucuronidase problem due to bacterial overgrowth, isn't that going to mess up this same pathway, or am I?
Yep, it definitely can. And you can see here with the different, metabolites, right? Your 4 is going to be a problem area, right? So your 4, your 2-hydroxy, your 2-hydroxy going into this 4-hydroxy right here could be a problem. 2-hydroxy tends to be a little bit less damaging right here, especially if you have good COMT and methylation. Because all these things can conglomerate. So you can see how E1, E2, and E3 can all go side by side. They can all transition, but then you can see they can go down to the 16 pathway, which tends to be a little bit more gentler. It can go down the 4 pathway, which can go into reactive oxygen species. It can also get methylated, right? What's methylation? Folate, B6, right? B12 really helps support methylation, choline. And then also glutathione can help decrease a lot of this too. So healthy glutathione, healthy sulfur, healthy cruciferous vegetables, healthy digestion of our animal products. And that can help a lot of this methylation issue and detoxification. And then of course we have our E2-hydroxy over here, which again, methylation is very important. Folate, B12, B6, choline, right? Healthy cruciferous vegetables are going to be really important for here. And we can even, if it's really high, we can even do things like DIM. We can do things like calcium to glucarate. We can do extra fiber, things like that to help bind it up.
Yeah, and the reason you're saying this is so important is because we need to get out these excess hormones, right? We don't want them just sitting in the tank, so to speak, after they've gone through this process. So you're saying the glucarate, the glutathione, the methylation, these are all the processes in the body to get rid of these once they're done. I don't know what the right word is, but once they've been used by the body,
excrete your body will conjugate them, bind up proteins to them and excrete them. And so we're going to really focus on a lot more glutathione, support more sulfur amino acids. If we see this guy over here, the 4-hydroxy E1's higher. And then, of course, you can always give sulfur support, methylation as well, which is going to be the B6, B12, folate, choline, all of that as well. And this will support both of these 2-methoxy, 2-hydroxy, as well as 4-hydroxy E1. All of these are going to be very helpful. You can't hurt to support any of those. And if we have anyone that has, estrogen cancer, risk, well, we tend to, if we need estrogen, in someone's more menopausal, we're going to try to support more estriol, which is going to be more cancer protective. But if someone has a previous cancer history, we probably will not do any hormones at all on the estrogen side and just focus on progesterone as long as their cancer is not progesterone sensitive, and good, healthy herbal support to help modulate some of the receptor sites.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome.
Questions
And
there?
this ties into a lot of stuff we do with the gut too, which is really cool because we're often going to be in detox too. We're often going to be using glutathione for mold or chemical toxins. We're going to be using calcium D-glucarate to help with zearalenone or other mycotoxin removal. We're going to be using possibly a methylated multi based on what we see with poor mitochondrial function on the organic acids test. So the cool thing that I'm seeing here, the trend is that the whole picture works together. So by working on the other body systems, we're already really fixing the majority of stuff we're seeing here, plus the addition of some of the extra hormonal support.
Yeah, exactly. And then kind of the general ratio of healthy estrogens is we like to see a kind of, we have the what's called the estrogen ratio, where we look at estradiol, estrone relative to 16 hydroxy, right? So it's like we're looking at basically E1, E2, E4, and 16. We like to see a higher level of 16 in relationship to 4 and 2, right? 16 tends to be more cancer protective. Why? Because most of it's coming from estriol. And then you can see 2 and 4 tend to be a little bit more from stronger estrogens. E2 and E1 are stronger estrogens. E3 is a weaker estrogen. So we kind of have our 2, 4, and 16 metabolite ratios, right? So you can see 2, 4, and 16. We want to have higher levels of 16 in relationship to lower levels of 2 and 4. And again, it just depends upon how the metabolism is too, right? If we're metabolizing these things well, not as big of a deal, right? Because why these hormones come up higher typically is we're either getting the hormones in our body from hygiene products, from plastics, from chemicals in our environment, or we're just not metabolizing them. So we make sure the lifestyle components are dialed in where we're not getting them in our body. And two, we make sure that we're metabolizing them as well. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And,
Okay.
and why we're not metabolizing them, I just want to make that clear to people. That could be due to gut issues, right? There is a gut hormone component here.
Yeah, so the beta-glucuronidase enzyme really helps metabolize a lot of estrogens. And when beta-glucuronidase goes high, it takes the estrogens that would have handcuffs on them or a straitjacket on them that would be escorted out of the body, and it breaks those handcuffs and allows them to go back into general population. And so having good, healthy gut levels is very important. Now, if you come down here a little bit more, this is kind of cool. We look at melatonin levels. This patient's mid-range, not that big of a deal. These are the same markers over here, so we're not worried. This is cortisone pattern. I don't really care about it. It almost always is congruent with what we see on the cortisol side. You can see this kind of with more emotional stress issues. This is more like inflammatory stress, but almost always, they always tend to have a similar pattern as the other side. So I don't really care as much because you can see the cortisone pattern is almost the same as the cortisol pattern, right?
And that's not going to change protocol.
It's not going to change protocol, and the cortisol is the more physiological active compound, right? Cortisol gets broken down downstream to cortisone, which is a weaker kind of metabolite. It's the weaker sibling, so it's not going to be the stronger one we're worried about. And these are all the same numbers on here. This test is very confusing if you don't know what you're looking at, because there's a lot of repetitive data. That's just more, I think, so people don't have to scroll around as they're going over the labs. It's kind of repetitive for the doctor so they can explain it to the patient. But if the patient's looking at it, they think, wait, this is new. This is new. This is new. Oh, this is like the third time they're saying it. Not a big deal. All right. And then this is where we're looking at some of the markers here in regards to organic acids.
How does this correlate to the oat? I mean, have you found
it's
this
pretty
to be
good.
Accurate? Okay.
It's pretty good. It's on point most of the time. Sometimes it can be off. I always tell patients if we have an organic acid test like the Great Plain Lab or the Genova, we're going to always listen to that one as the most important, because that test is specific for organic acids. And there's a greater sample there too. So it's going to be more accurate. But if we have this test in by itself, we'll still utilize it. So out of the gates, you can see here, B12, this is for methylation, looks pretty good, 1.5. Xanthuronate, this is a B6 marker, kinourinate, look pretty good. Glutathione's on the lower side, right? So with this patient, we may want to support either some kind of a sulfur amino acid or some kind of glutathione to help with estrogen metabolism. And again, it just depends out of the gates. If we're not providing a ton of hormone support, her hormones are so low as well, it may not be a top priority out of the gate. If the person's hormones were higher, definitely a top priority out of the gates. Okay. And then this is interesting. This looks at the catecholamines. This looks at basically adrenaline or catecholamine. They're the exact same thing. By the way, norepinephrine, epinephrine, exact same thing. 3 words that mean the same thing. I know it's really confusing. So we have dopamine, which is a homovanillate metabolite, and then we have vanillate, which is a metabolite of adrenaline or epinephrine. And so dopamine is a precursor to norepinephrine or epinephrine. So the more chronically stressed you are, you will pull dopamine. And so they have high levels of dopamine metabolism and high levels of adrenaline metabolism. What does that mean? It means this pathway here is redlined. So we're really breaking down and metabolizing lots of dopamine, lots of adrenaline. And that could be part of the reason why the adrenals are more depleted here, right? And so we may want to add in some amino acids to support some of the catecholamines. The catecholamines are definitely stressed. Now, we just have to make sure as we add some of those support in that we're fixing underlying issues. So we're fixing diet, we're fixing blood sugar, we're trying to get sleep better, we're not over-exercising, we're making sure all those things are pretty good. And then again, melatonin's on the lower end of the range, but it's at 24. The range is 10 to 85, so it's not that bad. I mean, it's in the bottom third. I'd only work on this if there's sleep issues. And typically, I'm always going to be supporting melatonin with amino acid precursors first. I'm never going to target melatonin by itself unless we absolutely have to. I'd rather give building blocks and let the body do with it what it's going to do first than force melatonin. But if we have to, we can at the lowest possible dose. All right,
What are you doing? What are you going to do for aminos on the homovanillate, vanillate? You're mentioning there you may come in and support aminos.
Yeah, so if you look at the range, they're not super high. It's 6. Remember, this goes 6.4, high end of the range, 4 to 13. So I'd probably come in there with some tyrosine. Definitely, I throw in some extra B vitamins, extra B6, even though B6 looks good, just because these pathways are going to be stressed. So I really want to make sure some of the B vitamins are there. Some of the extra amino acids are there. I'm going to work on some of the adaptogens for the adrenals. I'm going to work on some of the adaptogens for the female hormones. We'll throw in a little bit of DHEA. We'll throw in a little bit of pregnenolone building blocks as well. If we go look here.
So would you come in and never do DLPA over tyrosine in that situation? Would you go based on symptoms? Like if somebody was like super weepy and crying at the drop of the hat, would you say, okay, we're going to go DLPA instead, or you're just going to go tyrosine?
I would just do tyrosine out of the gates. I'd only do more DLPA stuff if there's like a lot more chronic pain, because DLPA will tend to go down more of that beta endorphin pathway, which could be helpful for chronic pain stuff. If not, I would just hit more of the tyrosine and the B6 and then really calm down the HPA axis. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And then again, you could see here, pregnenolone is an important building block that we like to use because it's the mother of all hormones. Now, I like it, but you don't want to just take it willy-nilly. I like to always use the lowest possible dose, and I like to use it sublingually to bypass the gut. And you can see so you can see here, pregnenolone can go downstream to progesterone, right? And then you can see pregnenolone can also go downstream to DHEA, which can then go downstream to our sex hormones, right? Potentially some of the androgens, potentially some of the female hormones, right? Go right from here to andro to E1, that goes to E2, and then that can go to E3, all right? And then it can also go downstream to testosterone too, okay? And then it can also go downstream to your mineral corticoids, which are right here, DHEA to... Where's aldosterone here? Help me find aldosterone. Where is it? There, andro, E1. Let me know if you can see it, but there should be a pathway where it goes downstream to aldosterone, which helps hold on to our minerals.
Is it at the bottom? Scroll down. I'm seeing it. No, I don't see it on here.
Maybe they left it out on this graph, but there should be a pathway that goes down to aldosterone, which is a mineral corticoid, which helps you hold on to your minerals as well. Now, also too, if you have progesterone, right, but then you're having a lot of like inflammation, right, you can go progesterone down to 17-hydroxyprogesterone, and then that can go down to cortisol, right? So if you're chronically inflamed, you can create low levels of progesterone because progesterone is going from here right downstream to cortisol. So that's why chronic stress and chronic inflammation could throw off your female hormone balance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it shows there too. mother's diet during pregnancy, insulin resistance, obesity, inflammation, hypothyroidism, licorice, phthalates. I like how they put the information about what's going to contribute to the problem. That's really cool.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then also you can see here, you can go your cortisol, right? And then your cortisol, this is your free cortisol here, right? This is your active cortisol. So this is your free cortisol here. And the free cortisol is going to be what we measure on the cortisol rhythm graph. And then it can go down the cortisol that's more inactive, right? We have our THE cortisol as well, which is part of our cortisone.
We
So
need to do a show. Let's do another one on this and review our own. I'm going to get a new one and let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So our metabolized cortisol is THF plus THE, right? This is our total cortisol. And then our free cortisol is just the THF. So F for free, right? So when we look at this here, the cortisol, right? This is the free cortisol, right? And then the total cortisol is the free plus the E, just an FYI. So we're looking at the cortisone plus the cortisol is what the total cortisol is on that graph above, just so you guys kind of wrap your head around that. And they left out the aldosterone here. Let me just see if it's there. Aldosterone. Nope, not there. So yeah, they left that out, but that should be in there somewhere as well. I'll put a graph on that. All right. Anything else you want to highlight there, Evan?
No, I would just tell people that this is a really good starting place, but I just want to make sure that if you go to just the hormone person, that they don't just treat this, because I think it's really important to understand that there is a massive issue with bacterial overgrowth messing up some of these pathways. So if you come in and you're doing all these hormones, but you've got the buildup because of those glucuronidation pathway issues, I'm seeing that with mold too, that these glucuronidation issues, people are on hormones and sometimes they feel worse. And I think it's because they're not addressing some of these other pathways. I don't think it shows glucuronidation on this, does it? This panel?
No, that's going to be more on the detoxification side.
Okay.
Any other questions there?
No, I'm good.
Cool. And then just so you guys can see, I'll pull this over here real fast. So if we look at this one right here, just so you guys can see it. So normally progesterone, it can go from progesterone down here into aldosterone. And so in general, if we look here, it should go progesterone to aldosterone. So this pathway here, you'd see aldosterone kind of coming down here if it really extended all the way. Just an FYI on that. All right. Anything else? I think we hit everything pretty good here. So
are you saying progesterone could help aldosterone problems?
Yeah, exactly. So if we support pregnenolone, that could also help aldosterone issues. Also supporting licorice can help aldosterone. There's basically a drug called Florinef, right? There's Cortef that supports cortisol levels that are very low. Okay. And there's Florinef, which supports aldosterone, and licorice has an effect of mimicking aldosterone. So that can be helpful because when your adrenals are really weak, you may have a hard time holding on to your minerals. And so that's important because we need healthy blood pressure to perfuse blood to the brain, oxygen to the brain. And we also need good minerals to help our sodium and potassium pump to work properly. We need electrolytes for our nerves to work. So all these are really, really important.
So one last question, then we should wrap it up. So if someone is taking adaptogenic herbs, they're doing adrenal supports, they're doing hormones, they're doing licorice, what's the approach or protocol to doing this test? If we get the test kit in their hands and they're on, let's say, an adaptogen blend, they're doing the ashwagandha, the licorice and everything. Do you suggest taking a break or does it not matter? We're going to see how the body's functioning while on those herbs.
You're talking about down the road?
No, I'm saying like right now.
If they're already on them. If they're already on them, it may not be bad to take a look at kind of where they're at with them already on them. Yeah, for sure. That I don't see that being a bad situation. If they're taking hormone support, it just depends where they're at. I usually don't like it the day of just because you can get an artificially high reading.
Yeah.
If it's in your system that day. So usually I'll maybe take 24 hours off. That way it's not overly high in the system. That way,
but you still see the trend. Yeah. I'm always on the fence about it because you've got so many people taking blends, which is great. I think you and I have really helped educate people about adaptogens, but you've got people taking so much and it's like, well, are we seeing an artificially good cortisol pattern or is this really how your cortisol pattern looks? So I think maybe a day or two off sounds smart.
Yeah. If it's herbs, I'm not worried about those as much because they're going to be more modulating. Mm-hmm. And it's just where they're at, you know, and if they tell me that, hey, I've been on them for the last couple of months and I'm feeling better, good, we'll just have you stay on it and we'll just take that into consideration on the test.
Okay.
when we're interpreting it. Because if they have some adrenal issues and they're doing well with that, well, guess what? We probably still want to make that part of their plan anyway. We're not going to change it too much, right?
Yeah. Well said.
All right, any questions there so far? I think we hit it
No,
all.
No, that's it. I think we should do a part 2 and review our own. That'll be fun. I'm going to get another one and run one on myself, and you should do one too.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I like it a lot. So I think we hit a lot of good stuff here. Hope anyone listening, you can see that Evan and I are kind of the real deal when it comes to this. Like, we actually do this. We're in the trenches. A lot of people that you may see online are they're like thought leaders from a let's say esoteric standpoint, meaning they're not actually doing this, they're not actually practicing. So we try to differentiate ourselves by bringing actual information. So just kind of know this isn't theoretical stuff. This is kind of the real deal. And hopefully that gives you confidence to take action and to try some of the things. Maybe you want to dig in, maybe you want to get testing, maybe you want to reach out to Evan or myself. We're here to help you out if you need more help. Of course, start with all the foundations. We have thousands of hours of free content because we know 99.9% of patients that we work with or help, they're doing it with our free content. We're not even seeing them. Now, if you're ready for that next step and you want to dive in, we'll put links down below so you guys can reach out. evanbrand.com to reach out to Evan. Evan's available worldwide. And myself, Dr. J, justinhealth.com to schedule with myself as well. We appreciate you guys connecting with us all. Anything else you want to say, Evan?
No, people really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll make sure to have the link. If you listen on audio, your mind's probably blown right now. You thought, what the heck just happened? We will make sure to give you the link. That way you can see this thing, because the screen share is great. And you just want to give you kudos. You're a great teacher, and you've taught me a lot about the Dutch too. So I really appreciate it. And your eye to detail on this thing is awesome. And most people don't have that eye. So we really look up to it and really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Evan. Really appreciate it. And if anyone has any hormone issues that are way out of balance and you want to double check it with some blood work too, I don't have a problem with that either, especially some of the androgens. I always like to double check with blood if we're seeing some chronically high stuff. Feel free and do that as well. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. Feel free to give us a share as well. Thumbs up. And if you want to write us a review, that gets us motivated. We'll put a review link right down below if you want to write us a review on iTunes. Appreciate it. You guys have a phenomenal day.
Take care now. Bye-bye.
Take care, y'all. Bye.
Got a question for Dr. J? Go to beyondwellnessradio.com and click the questions button. Then tune in to hear the answer. Also, if you like the show, click below to review us on iTunes. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.